Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm coming to y'all with another deck tech. I know these have been kind of inconsistent, but, you know, I don't really have a set schedule for these kind of things. So today, I want to get into one of my wife's decks. This is Kozilek, the Great Distortion. And this was a deck that was actually inspired by an episode of Game Nights. I actually had Kozilek, the Great Distortion as my own deck back when Oath of the Gatewatch first dropped, and I actually managed to pack one in the pre-release. And I thought, okay, this would be cool, how can I build this? And I took a lot of cards from my old Duretti Scrap Savant deck that had just recently died at that time, and I built it for myself. And I thought, yeah, this is cool, it's not really for me though, and I took the deck apart. Well, years later, you know, me and my wife got together, and she's become a big fan of Magic just like I have, and she loved watching Ashlen Rose's deck on game nights. It was this deck in particular, the Kozilek, the Great Distortion deck. Oh, by the way, quick shout out, I want to say thank you to Ashlen for signing these awesome tokens for us. We found these on eBay and they really resembled Ashlen, so we just couldn't resist asking her to sign those for us, and she was awesome enough to do so. Great person, very nice to talk to. So yeah, she inspired this deck, and I want to go ahead and get into it. You may notice this is not a typical Kozilek, the Great Distortion. This was actually done by TheProxyGuy on Twitter. Reached out to him, and apparently this was a very nerve-wracking project, so I do apologize for that. But it's an awesome foil, but still white-bordered Kozilek, which, as you know, if you try to foil out a white-border card, it just turns the border silver, kind of like an unhinged or unstable foil card. So this is actually like a layer of, I would assume, some kind of plastic over the top of it on the borders to keep it from being overly reflective, which is extremely cool. Love this proxy, turns a lot of heads. Very, very fun stuff. So Kozilek is a 12/12 for 8 and 2 colorless legendary creature Eldrazi. And when you cast a spell, if you have fewer than 7 cards in your hand, you draw cards equal to the difference. Menace, discard a card to counter a spell with converted mana cost equal to the discarded card's mana cost. So pretty interesting, kind of a colorless control / ramp type deck, and there is a lot of ramp in this deck because the whole game plan is to play big fat Eldrazi and to smash face. Not a true tribal deck, but it kind of is a tribal deck. If you're playing colorless, you're just going to be playing a lot of Eldrazi anyhow, unless you go die hard into artifact creatures. Let's go ahead and get into the 99, starting with the lands. Going to speed through these because they're not that interesting. We have Urza's Power Plants, Urza's Mine, and Urza's Tower. I had a set of them. I figured, you know, why not? Might as well try to play them somewhere. We've never gotten the Tron set online, but there's not too much reason to not go ahead and play these over basic wastes anyways. Ancient Tomb. This is one of the cards that came out of another one of my decks that had died around the same time this was built. It's just awesome for the deck. Mana ramp on your lands. Temple of the False God. Not a card that I typically love to play in Commander, but we need as much ramp as we can get in this deck. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. Kind of similar, but it requires 7 lands to be on board, but it can always at least tap for 1 colorless, so it's a little bit better in that regard. Eldrazi Temple. Taps for 2 when casting Eldrazi. Eye of Ugin makes them cost 2 less, as well as serving as a tutor. Terrain Generator, we can, you know, tap for colorless, or we can use it to ramp wastes from our hand onto the battlefield. Isolated Watchtower, kind of cool. At the very least, it's always some scry if there's a green deck at the table, because they will almost always have more land than we do. And sometimes we can even use it to ramp, which is kind of cool. Haunted Fengraf is just a way for us to get something back from the graveyard because there's not a ton of recursion in colorless. Buried Ruin, the same thing for artifacts. Blast Zone, pretty good removal on a land. Ghost Quarter, we choose to play this because my wife isn't a huge fan of Wasteland and Strip Mine. She plays them both in her Depala deck, but she prefers something a little bit more friendly. And she tries to play this in most of her decks as a good answer to, like, Imprisoned in the Moon and Song of the Dryads, because it's easier to just go ahead and Ghost Quarter her own land, and because she's Ghost Quartering the commander, which is usually what gets hit with those kind of effects, she's actually not losing mana because she loses the Ghost Quarter, but she goes and gets a wastes, so breaks even. Sanctum of Eternity is awesome. It allows us to put Kozilek back in our hand during our turn to recast and draw up to a new hand of 7 cards. Command Beacon. Sometimes Kozilek gets killed a lot and gets very expensive to the point that we can't even recast it. Command Beacon helps with that. Both Detection Tower and Arcane Lighthouse remove pesky protection effects. Zalfirin Void is just a scry land in colorless that enters untapped, which is nice. Seagate Wreckage hasn't drawn that many cards yet, but again, there's not too many reasons to just not go ahead and play this over a basic wastes. Mystifying Maze we chose for its mana production. I'm not sure if there's an argument for the new, like, Maze of Skopthos, or whatever it is out of Theros Beyond Death. It's basically the same card. Might add that in addition, might take it out. I don't really know if there's a big difference between the two cards. Sanctum of Ugin is a tutor whenever we need it to be. Emergent Zone lets us cast, a giant fat Eldrazi at instant speed, which can be pretty good. Homeward Path, because we really don't like people stealing our creatures. Mirror Pool to get some valuable copies of something. Reliquary Tower to give us no maximum hand size. Rogue's Passage to give us unblockability. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 wastes. Alright, so that was the boring land package. So now let's go ahead and get into the boring mana ramp package, because this deck needs a lot of mana, more so than most other strategies will need their mana. So we play a lot of ramp. We've got Everflowing Chalice, Soul Ring, because Soul Ring is Soul Ring. Wayfarer's Bauble should see play in any deck that isn't green. It's just a very good source of ramp. I've been playing it for years. Felwar Stone, it's just a 2-mana rock. Obviously the color is irrelevant to us, but if you think about the fact that that monocolor decks play the diamonds for ramp, then you realize that this is still just as good in our deck as a diamond would be in a monocolor deck. Hedron Crawler is a dork. Mindstone is a good rock that can be a little bit of card draw later. Thought Vessel gives us no max hand size. Plague Mirror is just here to serve as a mana dork. The Infect is irrelevant. Fractured Power Stone is an interesting one. People always get confused when they see this, but it is still just basically a colorless diamond that enters untapped. And my wife and I do enjoy quite a bit of Plane Chase, so it just happens to also have relevance in those games. But in a colorless deck, it's just another, 2-mana rock that can help get you ahead of the game early in the game. Because the difference between casting a Thrawn Dynamo on turn 3 and on turn 4 is actually pretty huge. Victory Chimes. I actually really enjoy this card because we do have a Mind's Eye in the deck, so it's basically always... with Mind's Eye and Victory Chimes, we can draw a card on everyone else's turn, which is kind of nice. Palladium Mirror is just another mana dork. Unstable Obelisk doubles as removal. Inspiring Statuary lets us tap down our artifacts as mana rocks when casting our Eldrazi, which can be really funny to tap down like a Lightning Greaves to help cast a Kozilek. Basalt Monolith, just in here is another source of, 3-mana ramp. Burnished Heart, yet again, if you're not playing green, you probably should be playing Burnished Heart. Worn Power Stone, Hedron Archive, doubles us in card draw. Summon Simulacrum goes in most decks. Urgolem's Eye, Thran Dynamo, Gilded Lotus. Kozilek's Channeler is actually one of the weaker pieces in here. I've been considering replacing this with something better. Geode Golem is awesome in this deck. Being able to cast Kozilek is, as early as turns 3 to 5, thanks to our huge amount of ramp, can be really devastating to opponents. And I like that this allows us to dodge the initial casting cost. We still have to pay commander tax, but that isn't too big of an issue. Ugin the Ineffable is cost reduction that also doubles as removal, as well as pseudo card draw, which is awesome. I actually don't have the other Ugin in this deck simply because I don't own one. Which is funny, back during Fate Reforged, I opened 13 of them. 12 of the regular versions in one of the Ugin's Fate promos. And I traded them all off at that point, helped my friends get the copies they need, and now I actually have none for myself, which is kind of sad, but I will get one at a later date. But this Ugin, awesome for the deck. Warping Whale, I love this card. Countering a Wrath of God or Fumigate type effect, countering any Sorcery Speed board wipe, is something that no one really expects from the Kozilek deck, especially when Kozilek is not on the battlefield. Not of This World basically just says, no, you can't kill my commander or any of my other big fatties. Soul of New Phyrexia is another way to deal with board wipes. Now we get into the Eldrazi. Alright, so Endless One. It's however big we need it to be whenever we draw it. Eldrazi Mimic can just put a lot more damage on opponents by, turning it into a 12-12 when Kozilek enters the battlefield. Matter Reshaper, cool little source of advantage. Thought-Knot Seer is a good source of disruption. Reality Smasher in this deck is really just a, fat stomping creature for the mid-game. And, getting them to discard some cards that they want to target is actually kind of cool. Makes it difficult to deal with. Endbringer also plays really well with the Mind's Eye. Or sorry, not the Mind's Eye, the Victory Chimes. Just another source of card draw, and I love the versatility on it. Oblivion Sower is pretty interesting. I love it in my meta specifically because there is a lot of delving effects going on. There's a lot of treasure cruises and dig through times being cast, and now that me and my friend Logan have built Uro and Crocea, this is definitely going to get a lot more land than it otherwise would. It's just a nice source of ramp, and, you know, a 5/8 can be difficult to attack into. Conduit of Ruin doubles as a tutor as well as a piece of cost reduction, which is awesome. Deceiver of Form can very often just kill people. I mean, if we reveal one of our Ulamogs or Emrakul or something off the top of our deck and turn our Palladium Mirrors and Hedron Crawlers into gigantic creatures, it can be really difficult. Obviously, you wouldn't want to use actual Ulamog because of the legendary rule, but something like It That Betrays can be really devastating. Or even just an Artisan of Kozilek as a 10/9 Annihilator, Annihilator 2 specifically, and on cast this can bring us back one of our important creatures. Void Winnower, so your opponents literally cannot even. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger is an awesome source of removal because it's going to exile 2 things on cast and exile the top 20 of their deck on attack. Plays very well with the, what's the name of the card? I already forgot. Oblivion Sower. Also, being indestructible is a nice added bonus. Kozilek is a good source of draw 4, and just a nice, big, fat threat. Pawn of Ulamog is in here because I like it. That's it. I think it's a cool card. I wanted to fill some slots, and I wanted to keep as many Eldrazi in the deck as possible. Ulamog the Infinite Gyre, yet again another good source of removal, a hard-to-remove indestructible threat, and solid Annihilator. It That Betrays is awesome in any deck with as much Annihilator as this has. And Emrakul the Promised End will indeed promise the end of the game if you cast it in the mid to late game. People really don't like being mind-slaved with this. I mean, they still get a turn afterwards, but you've usually just disrupted them so much that they can't do very much with it. I've cast this on my friend, Will, and, like, use Survival of the Fittest, discarding creatures from his hand and failing to find, and cracking fetch lands and failing to find. And it's just brutal. It can really set a player behind. Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots both provide haste and protection to Kozilek, which is very important. Mystic Forge acts kind of like card draw for us because it lets us cast the top card of our deck as long as it's an artifact or a colorless non-land card, which is our entire deck. Mind's Eye, not the best piece of card draw, but, you know, when we have as much mana as we do in this deck, it can often draw us a fair amount of cards and pairs very well with the Victory Chimes. Staff of Nin, yet again, it's a very expensive source of card draw, but when you're in colorless, you do what you have to do. And pinging down people's little 1/1s, yeah, not irrelevant. Sandstone Oracle, if we have an opponent on the table with more cards in hand than we do, this can draw us the difference. If there's ever a blue deck, or even these days a green deck at the table, thanks to stuff like Rishkar's expertise, this can generally help us catch up to them. Into the removal, we have Brittle Effigy. Being able to exile a creature in colorless is pretty awesome, and I've noticed that if you play this early in the game, players just often won't cast their best creatures onto the board, so you're almost countering spells with it because they just don't want to cast into it. Spatial Contortion is in here solely as a piece of removal. I mean, +3, -3, yeah, you can use it as pump, but it's almost always in here to kill someone's commander or value creature. Titan's Presence is an excellent source of removal in our lack of colors. Transmogrifying Wand is just fun. It may not be the best piece of removal, it may not be the most optimal, but it is definitely fun turning people's creatures into oxen. Duplicates, just a solid source of exile, and can often leave us with a big fat body on the board. Spine of Ishsaw, yet again, just more removal in our lack of colors. Same with Scour from Existence. Same with Meteor Golem. And then into our board wipes, we have Nevinyrral's Disc, which can be dangerous because we have a lot of artifacts, but I do prefer it over Perilous Vault because at least this can leave stuff like Ulamog on the board, and on the chance we draw one of our reanimation effects, then this lets us get it back, whereas the other will not. All is Dust, definitely a staple in these decks, and also Ugin should be in here, so also run a copy of Ugin if you build this deck. And then finally, Shimmermere. I didn't know where to really put this. Just let's just cast our artifacts as though they had flash. This was a quick swap in whenever Paradox Tension was banned. So that is my wife's Kozilek the Great Distortion deck, inspired by Ashlen Rose's deck on game nights. It is a very cool deck, a very fun deck, and it is a fairly powerful deck. The interesting restriction of not having colors to use in your deck can make some deck choices really unique and difficult for opponents to predict. Additionally, the amount of counterspells you get off with Kozilek can be deceivingly high. People really don't expect you to be able to counter really low-cost cards like Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares in a mono-brown deck, but if you're at the point where you cast Kozilek, you don't mind discarding your Brittle Effigy or even your Soul Ring or Wayfarer's Bauble if you have those in hand to stop the removal, and you might even purposely choose to sandbag Soul Ring if you draw it late, just to answer those extremely common 1-mana removal spells. So, yeah, that is Kozilek the Great Distortion. It is an awesome Commander deck. It's a ton of fun, and if you've never built Mono Brown in Commander, I definitely recommend it. It's a unique experience and can definitely help create some very interesting games. Also, I feel like if you do, you kind of have to use these Dragon Shield clear mats. It's fun to have colorless sleeves with your colorless deck. So yeah, big thanks to TheProxyGuy for the Kozilek. Big thanks to Ashlen for the inspiration, as well as signing these awesome tokens. My wife's Azazon deck uses them all the time. Very cool stuff. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And until next time, peace, and take care. I'll see you with the next deck tech.